the world is giving you a special Showdown specific breakdown of this one, but we've been doing it all year. You got to lead up to the big game here with our darkest and most repressed thoughts about where to go to be contrarian on the slate. I'm Chris Baggs, joined today by the top DFS player in the world in a number of sports and just a great human being who's out in Atlanta right now, Mr. Alex Baker, the founder of Osmo. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing great. Looking forward to talking this single game slate with you guys. It'll be a nice change of pace because we've been doing the normal slates the whole year, but one game, different strategy. It'll be cool to discuss how to approach this week's games.
Yeah, and we are going to talk a little bit more about strategy today because we got to fill an hour somehow, but also because it is a lot of you guys may not have been playing Showdown videos all year, so we'll be doing our Showdown slates all year, rather. So we'll be doing that today, taking you through some of the finer points with Alex. And we'll also, of course, we are joined by the other brain trust here, one of the smartest men in football analysis out there, Evan Silva. How are you doing, Evan?
Doing really well. This is the last NFL game for a long time. Miss it, but looking forward to getting a few weeks of rest in as well. But I'm really amped for this game. I mean, the Rams opened as favorites, and then a ton of bets came in. Not necessarily, sharp bets, but just a ton of bets came in on the Patriots, immediately moving the Patriots to favorites in the game. I think it took like an hour for the Rams to go from underdogs to favorites, to go from favorites to underdogs. I'll be interested to hear your guys' contrary takes, because I feel like just after kind of taking the pulse of everybody on social media and listening to every podcast imaginable and preparing my own kind of breakdown of the Super Bowl, I feel like I kind of have a sense for where the public is going to be. So it's going to be interesting to see on a show called On the Contrary where we're able to kind of divert and go off the beaten path.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll have to find some pivot points. Sorry, go ahead.
Everyone's on the over for the national anthem, but the under, that's where it's at.
One of my old colleagues at Barstool actually has for years done prop bets, like a blog about it. And he actually got to the point where he was able to find the people who were at rehearsals last year and were timing it out. And I think it was still wrong, actually. It ended up being over or under, whatever the opposite of what it was during rehearsals. So no sure things in the prop bet game for the Super Bowl. But yeah, we are presented by Fantasy Draft, by the way. Of course, thank you to the Fantasy Draft, by the way, for supporting us all throughout the season. Fantasy Draft has lower contest fees than the other major providers out there, and they pay out a minimum of 25% of players out there. It's a great way to build your bankroll regardless of skill. They don't do single game showdown slates, so they are not active for the Super Bowl. But for NBA season, get over there now. Check it out. Use promo code Contrary. You'll get $5 free on your first deposit. And freebies like these, again, are a great way to build your bankroll if you're a new player. So go to fantasydraft.com now or download the app and use that promo code Contrary for $5 off. Alex, just give people quick thoughts on the Fantasy Draft experience.
One thing I noticed playing on there the other day, they have some rake-free head-to-head games. I'm not sure if that was a special promo or if it's all the time. But anytime you can play rake-free, I mean, that's like adding 10% to your ROI. Completely huge. So that's a great reason to play there if you're interested in cash games. One other thing they're doing that I like is on big NBA slates, they're staggering the lock a lot of times with DraftKings and FanDuel. So DraftKings and FanDuel might lock at 6, where Fantasy Draft locks at 6:30. And that kind of enables you to monitor the late news a lot better. And it's a no late swap site, so you don't have to worry about guys not playing quite as much. So I definitely like that change them in.
Yeah, so there you go. So check out Fantasy Draft now. Go to fantasydraft.com or download the Fantasy Draft app on your app store of choosing and use that promo code Contrary for $5 off. But we are talking about Showdown slates today. Again, it is a Super Bowl, so we're all very festive. Evan's got a fresh cut. Alex is in Atlanta. Alex, tell us what's going on in Atlanta. You went to a big party the other night, and apparently you're now a to-do guy out there. You're on the hit list, the hot list.
Not exactly on the hot list, but man, I wish, because there are all these events for the Super Bowl. Obviously, I've never been. I ended up winning a trip through FanDuel in one of their charity contests. Never has participating in charity been so rewarding for me, but I'll take it. But one of the DraftKings guys reached out. They were telling me about this setup they have. They rented out a bar. They're having players stop by and give interviews and stuff. and he also invited me to this EA Sports Madden Bowl, which was like this reserved space in this Ludacris concert. So we got to see Luda, Migos, and Luda had some of his pals like Sierra come on stage. And like because it was like a big show, they're able to get a lot of athletes to come by. We went down to the like players thing, me and the guy from DraftKings, and it was like totally dank. Like people have been, I guess I heard the Migos were smoking a bunch of chronic like before we got there. And when we were leaving, I saw the biggest star of the night. I mean, I heard Mahomes was there. I saw Odell Beckham like having a great time talking to everybody. Some other guys, but I got completely struck at the end. I was walking out, and right in front of me was Mitch Trubisky.
Ooh. Did you fangirl out?
I was tempted. I told my girlfriend that was him. She didn't recognize him quite as well as I did. But we were on the street, and she saw him. She's like, Mitch, and he kind of didn't react at all. And the message I got was, he's like, I'm with my buddies right now. Like I don't wanna be embarrassed like that. So I just let him alone. I didn't try to get an autograph or anything.
Oh, that's sad. He should have known that you're one of his biggest supporters, possibly a fan club president, though I don't know if you've revealed that publicly.
Yeah, I actually run the fan Instagram page. I didn't know if I ever told you guys that.
Oiled up shirtless Mitch Trubisky's on there. Got to influence the people. But yeah, so you go. So Alex is in Atlanta. Follow him on Twitter. Follow at OsmoDFS on Twitter and Instagram. I'm sure you're posting some content, doing your cool things and whatever. And Osmo_com on Instagram too. I think we've said we need to post things from there. So when you're hanging out with Mitch Trubisky, Alex, you got to put it on the handle.
Well, I was actually really paying attention to what players were there. I was hoping to see some Rams and Pats players because it'd be like, well, they're not really focusing on the game. But I mean, I caught some wind of rumors like Tom Brady's ready to go, but that's about it.
Is that the buzz on the streets in Atlanta? Tom Brady fired up for this one. I like that a lot. Evan, how about you? Were you not tempted at all to try to go to Atlanta? I feel like you're one of the, I feel like you'd be a big hit with people who've probably been following you on Twitter for years.
No, I wasn't. My buddy Warren Sharp went down there though, and I've been talking to him every day. He's having a blast. Would have been cool if you would have run into you, Osmo. But no, I'm getting ready to go to Nashville for a Super Bowl party this weekend. I'm looking forward to that.
Is that a competitor site that I happen to hear about that too?
I didn't mention any names.
Well, there's lots of cool parties down in Nashville. Who knows where it could be? It could be just going to the Grand Ole Opry to have a time.
Exactly.
Let's talk about Showdown slates here. We'll obviously talk more Super Bowl stuff as we go because, again, got to fill that hour. But the Showdown slates are a very specific animal. I've been doing them videos, obviously, if you've been following our YouTube channel, doing them all year. And honestly, it was a bit of a learning curve, but there is a strategy to approach them. Alex, obviously, you've been playing them, had some great success this season as well on the Showdowns. What would you say are the key things to look at when making a Showdown lineup?
So I got to divide between FanDuel and DraftKings because the strategy is a lot different. But one strategy I found that consistently works over both sites is stacking the maximum players from one team and then just taking a one-off from the other team. I mean, it kind of makes sense because each team's opportunity, like each play they're running is a play the other team doesn't get a chance to. So one team's going to run more plays, one team's going to score more points, and if you have that team, you're in good shape. The Super Bowl, though, it's a little bit higher scoring, potentially, possibly a shootout. So what you want to do is build in the player correlations into your lineup. So a lot of times in a classic slate, nine people lineup, you'll probably only want to have like 3 or 4 guys, position players from the same game at most, probably more like 3. But like that's important because there's players in other games that one player in each game is probably going to have a lot of opportunity, and you're going to need a good combination of those to win. But in Showdown, since it's all happening in one game, the correlation between players are much stronger. So you want a lineup that really makes sense. So you want to have, if you're having Brady, you want to have like one or two of the wide receivers or James White or something like that. So it's like you gotta have some sort of scenario built into your lineup that makes sense that could happen, and maybe you'll walk away with a share of $1 million.
Yeah. So what would you say then are the big differences between DraftKings and FanDuel then? Like what would you say is, if you're building lineups for both, what would you watch out for on one side compared to the other?
So the one difference that causes a huge change in strategy is FanDuel, they don't multiply the salary of the 1.5 times points player. So Tom Brady is like, if he's 15K on FanDuel, it's either as MVP or as flex position. So the consequences, it's much more difficult to get a tier 3 player in a captain or MVP. Because the chance of them being the highest scoring player on the slate is pretty slim. Where on draft, you gotta get the guy that excels the most beyond their salary.
Interesting. Okay. So keep that in mind then when you're playing these things. And obviously we'll talk more of Alex's tips as we go. And again, we are going to have ownership projections up for the slate on the site at awesemo.com. Might not be a good time to get a football pass, but you might want to get an all access pass, switch into our NBA and NHL coverage, get 50% off of your first month with promo code Contrary. That's promo code Contrary on awesemo.com. Get an all access pass. You'll get the NFL stuff. And again, get half off of that first month. And we'll have the ownership up there, I believe, later today as a target. Just some formatting and issues that need to go into there. But let's talk about the game now. Evan, you're the guy who we feel like we really need to lean on. From a matchup perspective, I really looked at this one hard for my column that I wrote this week and for this preparing for this video. It's hard to imagine a world where the Patriots don't win this, at least on paper to me. And obviously, things can go sideways a million different ways. But how are you viewing the opportunity for New England, Evan? And how are you viewing, I guess, Brady here? Obviously, he's going to be the highest owned player on the slate. That's according to our ownership. We have him at 47.2% as a regular player on DraftKings right now. As a captain, a little bit less. But how are we feeling about the Patriots here, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really tightly matched game. So, on Wednesday morning, I did a podcast, and they asked me who did I think was going to win, and I was like, Patriots by 1. And then I did my full breakdown. And at the end of that, I was like Rams by 1, so I kind of think it's a little bit more of a tough call than you do, but I'd like the confidence. Where do the Patriots have advantages offensively, that we can capitalize on from a fantasy standpoint against the Rams? There aren't really too many. Patriots have, or the Rams have the number 1 defense against slot receivers. So that's a little bit of a concern for Julian Edelman. Now, look, Julian Edelman can still have a big game. I mean, he could come out of this with 11 targets. Josh McDaniels can move him around, use a lot of different concepts to get him open. But just on paper, he doesn't stand out as having a particularly great matchup. High-end tight ends have had big games against the Rams this year. George Kittle had 2 of them. Kelsey had a monster game against them. Jared Cook had 180 yards against him, of course, all the way back in week 1. Is Gronk still a high-end tight end? He kind of looked like it, I thought, against the Chiefs. That instills some confidence in him. But those are also the best, some of the best tight ends in the NFL. So that's really cherry picking to just say, oh, well, George Kittle and Travis Kelsey, hey, they had these monster games against the Rams. Gronk can do that too. I do like Gronk as a play, though. On FanDuel, he's only 500 more than Philip Dorsett. And Philip Dorsett was actually a guy that I was looking at. If you want to go a little bit deeper, I think he's going to get a lot of matchups with Marcus Peters on the outside. Marcus Peters is not like a fast corner. He's theoretically more of like a physical corner who's going to win in man coverage. But he's had ups and downs over the course of the year. Philip Dorsett has scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. He's got 13 targets over his last 3. On FanDuel, he costs 500 less than Gronk. So you're not really getting a great discount. I think that we're going to see a lot of Chris Hogan against Aqib Talib. That doesn't seem like a great matchup. We know that Chris Hogan's going to be out there a lot. The snaps are going to be good. The targets have been kind of in terms of like high value targets, he really hasn't been getting those. We know he's going to be out there though, and his matchup is tough. I think he's going to get a lot of Aqib Talib in the game. The Rams are really good. Like they have very athletic inside linebackers in particular. One of their guys, Corey Littleton, Pro Football Focus is number 3 overall pass coverage linebacker, really long arms, has 34-inch arms, and one of their biggest assets in running back coverage. And also Mark Barron, of course, played safety at Alabama. So that all, kind of doesn't add up perfectly for James White. And the Rams' run defense has been lights out in the playoffs. It wasn't good all year, but it's been lights out in the playoffs and against 2 prolific rushing attacks this Cowboys. So what does that mean for Sony Michel? So just on paper, I don't think that there's any, from a matchup standpoint, any weakness in the Rams defense that it stands out that the Patriots would attack. That doesn't mean that the Patriots aren't going to win. Doesn't mean that they're not going to put up a bunch of points. They're, brilliantly designed. Tom Brady has been playing his best football down the stretch, but I don't know, what stood out to you, Spags, when you were breaking down the game?
Yeah, so to me, I'm not sure that I buy into the rush defense quite as much for the Rams being that much better. I think they were able to shut down the Cowboys, and I'm a Cowboys fan. I watched them pretty closely. We've talked at length about Dak this year. I think Dak just didn't bring it enough for them to be able to pivot away from that. Whereas Tom Brady, the balls, Brady threw for over 500 yards last year versus an Eagles team who I think we would agree probably a better defense than this Rams one, especially with all the momentum they had and the pass rush that they were generating. 3 TDs as well in that game. The Atlanta, he 466 yards, 2 TDs. I just don't see how Brady doesn't have a big day throwing here. And I think that's where, so maybe let's just take it back to square one. Brady. Is Brady a must play? I think is the question out there. Alex?
So I think I wouldn't go as far as saying must play, but he's one of the guys you should have the most. And the reason I have is actually a little bit different. There's a huge advantage in picking quarterbacks in Showdown because of the correlation they have. Their production is almost entirely comprised of the production of the people they're passing to. And with Tom Brady, that's especially prevalent because he rarely ever actually rushes for any sort of offensive gain. So what you're going to see is if you have a lineup with Brady and 2 of his receivers, you're going to be more likely to win a tournament than if you have 2 running backs and a wide receiver or something. Just because for that second one to happen, all 3 players need to have great individual performances, but for the first, only 2 of them have to have great performances, and then the third is a consequence of those 2. So I think there's a big advantage in the correlation that a quarterback brings to your team.
Interesting. So yeah, I guess also part of it too, just thinking about it now, to me, there's a bit of a Thanos inevitability to this in the Avengers movies where it's just with the Patriots, you just know they're going to find a way to figure it out. And I just don't see how that's not going to involve Brady. I think, you need to have Brady going to some degree because they want to get some room for Michel to operate. And I see the way Breeze has played down the stretch. I don't think that was enough of a threat for the Rams where they were able to kind of maneuver and scheme around that, where Breeze didn't have a big day, or at least as big of a day as he could have had. And I think that's sort of where I see with the Patriots, where they're going to find a way to get the ball to people. I mean, would it be crazy to see Rex Burkhead have 10 catches or something here because James White is ineffective, or they run 2 running backs out of the backfield? There's so many ways that they attack things, which I find it hard to get away from. But Evan, I guess give me your thoughts on Brady since you're a little bit more intrigued by the Rams defense.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm playing Brady, but we're only deciding between 2 quarterbacks, So, on FanDuel, the first way that I looked at trying to build a lineup, and I'm still learning about these 1-game DFS slates for sure, and trying to learn from guys like Osimo and listening to Drew Dinkmeyer and people that have played a lot of the 1-game DFS slates over the course of the year. Because I'm still relatively new, I was thinking about just trying to jam in Brady and Goff on FanDuel, and then just picking a guy to stack them with, on the team. And my initial idea was because I think I like Gronk the best of the Patriots pass catchers in this game. Going with him and maybe going with someone a little bit more off the board. to stack with Goff, like maybe Josh Reynolds or Gerald Everett. But yeah, I mean, so much of this comes down to roster construction. Look, these are really good teams. That's why they're here. They've played their best football at the end of the season. They're even on the other side. I think for the Rams, there aren't there might be one glaring matchup advantage that the Rams offense has against the Patriots defense, and we'll get to that. Of course, the Patriots are going to be aware of that as well. But man, I mean, I think so much is like roster construction and game theory in a game on these one game DFS sites.
So let's talk about the running game here. We've talked a little about Sony Michel and James White, but I think we should key in a little more on these guys. Sony Michel getting a ton of touches, been around 25 touches so far in the playoffs, getting some targets, a few targets at least. And it does seem like they're going to have to give him some targets just to keep the Rams defense honest. I like Michel here. I don't know ownership wise. I think we have him right now at 29% projected ownership as a regular player on DraftKings, as a captain, about 6% right now. I think that's about where that seems fair to me. That seems like a pretty reasonable amount. I could see wanting to go a little bit over just because of the volume. Alex, how are you viewing Sony Michel's volume here? I feel like, that's a big spot to target, is getting that much volume, and there's really nobody else with the backfield split on the Rams who's going to get close to that amount of touches if he stays consistent. So how are you feeling about Michel?
Yeah, I think that he has a lot of potential to have a good game, as we talk about every week. His chance of totally bombing is pretty high too. The scenario where he's going to bomb is if the Patriots are playing from behind most of the game. He's probably not going to get nearly as much action. You really want him to rush between 15 and 20 times at least. The one thing I noticed is that his salary is pretty low compared to some of the other guys on the sites. So you get a little bit of a discount. So if he kind of fits in, I could definitely see playing him. One thing I don't like, though, is the fact that he's not correlated with any other player, really. So that makes it a little bit harder to build a roster that has that correlation that I'm looking to get. And I'm not that keen on picking defense this week just because of the pricing and the fact that these are both pretty strong offenses.
Let's talk about the other guy there then, also James White. Actually, Evan, give me more thoughts on Sony Michel, because I think you're a little bit less sold on his ability here. So to me, I see the Rams defense all year, 5.1 yards per rush allowed on the year. We can debate the last 2 weeks and they have looked better, but I think looking at the full picture of the work is what puts me more on thinking Michel could have a big day. But how do you see Sony Michel failing here, Evan?
No, that's very, very fair. I mean, we're doing a 2-game sample. It is impressive that the Rams run defense all of a sudden became light out against the Cowboys and the Saints, as opposed to some weak ass run defenses that they might have played, or rushing offenses that they might have played. But it's still just 2 games, and the passing game isn't as much of a weapon, for the Cowboys as it is for the Rams. And regarding the Saints, Drew Brees didn't play his best football down the stretch either. We talked ad nauseum about that. I expected him to have a better game, against the Rams, and he didn't. I think that, the Rams, I just think that at the end of the day, the Patriots are going to find ways to move the ball against the Rams. But it's hard, on paper, to say, this is clearly the way that they're going to do it. They're going to do it with scheme. They're going to do it with, winning on option routes. They might do it selectively with just, big plays that, are kind of random and high variance events. They may do it by using Julian Edelman a little bit more, to get him carries. Maybe even incorporating some Cordero Patterson. Julian Edelman has a carry in at least 1 carry in 6 of the Patriots' last 9 playoff games. That's actually one prop bet I really like for this week. You can just get, will Julian Edelman have a rushing attempt in the game? Yes or no? And yes. It's also a way to keep him away from the Rams' stingy slot coverage. I do think that Philip Dorsett is interesting, again, but you can't project him for a high number of targets because he's got 5 and 3 targets over his last 3 games. Is he all of a sudden going to spike up to like 7 or 8? Probably not. He doesn't get a lot of playing time. He's always under 50% of the snaps. So, but back to Sony Michel. What I thought was interesting last week is that Sony Michel played 35 snaps, James White played 34, and Burkhead played 30. That creates like a pretty difficult conundrum. I think that, at the end of the game, if you had Sony Michel in your fantasy lineups last week, like you were probably real frustrated what happened with Rex Burkhead late in the game. Like those should have been theoretically Sony Michel's touchdowns. When backfields become 3-man ordeals, they become very much, more difficult to project than when they're just 2. There's a huge difference from when it's just James White and it's Sony Michel as to when it's James White, Michel, and Rex Burkhead.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We are projecting James White for significantly more ownership than we are for Sony Michel. We have James White at about 42% projected ownership on DraftKings Showdown right now. See where Rex Burkhead is, but he must be very low. It does seem like a leverage point, and I guess I'm surprised that we have Rex Burkhead at 5.5%. So that seems like an inefficiency there. I guess the question is, how confident do we feel in James White? He's coming off of a down game, as Evan just mentioned. His snap count's coming down a little bit. Burkhead's maybe going up. Michel's maybe coming down a little. Alex, how are you viewing the opportunity of running backs, and would you want to have James White as your highest owned running back out of that group?
I think so. I think the fact that he catches passes makes him the highest value per play of any of the 3 players, just because you get the extra bonus each time. Burkhead, I feel like they're kind of riding him because they're riding the hot hand. I think what you're going to see happen is maybe he'll get like a carry or 2, and if he doesn't produce anything with those, then you might not see him very much for the rest of the game. So I definitely think he's the number 3, probably the least likely to produce. James White is kind of the lower variance play because he gets targets, gets that extra point. But then Sony Michel, he's really touchdown dependent, but he gets more touchdowns. I think based on the pricing on DraftKings, James White is only 400 more than Sony Michel. On FanDuel, he's actually 2,000 cheaper. So I think that I prefer him on both sides.
Interesting. Evan, how are you feeling about Rex Burkhead here? Do you have a similar thought about him just kind of being a hot hand guy and maybe not somebody to consider at too much depth?
It's just really difficult to predict. It seemed like the backfield had been narrowed down to White and Michel, like for the most part, till the last game. And all of a sudden it became a 3-man backfield. So I don't know, man. I think you look at ownership percentages, you look at what fits with your roster construction, you look at the salaries of the guys, and that's kind of how you decide. I don't think that there's any like you can't really take like a strong stand on Rex Burkhead. One note about him though is that because the Patriots they call run plays on 80% of Sony Michel's snaps, they call pass plays on 90% of James White's snaps. So they kind of telegraph to the defense what they're going to do on a given play based on when those guys are in. With Rex Burkhead, it's right around 50-50. That's kind of like an intriguing element that Rex Burkhead brings to the table that the other guys don't. And so, from that angle, you might like be able to project that he is going to have a big role again in this game just because he brings an element of deception to the defense.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think there's some logic in Burkhead, and I don't see his captain number here, but he seems like a guy who could open up some value. And again, as these guys mentioned, it is a play, and there is a lot of reasons to not go there, but he is one guy who jumps out from an ownership perspective based on our early projections here that we have that'll be going up later today. Let's talk more about Julian Edelman. He's the highest priced guy on the slate. Evan's given some reasons why he may struggle a little bit versus these these coverage there with the Patriots. And but also I may get a little more love in the rushing game and all that. I like Edelman here. I like his ability to kind of compete in different ways. He can go outside. He can get a lot of the dink and dunk passes, which obviously the Patriots may have to use pretty steadily here. Alex, how are you feeling about Edelman, though, being the highest priced guy here, even higher priced than the quarterbacks?
Yeah, That's pretty startling how high he's priced. I think that he's projecting to be a very productive player. But I feel like if you're getting a 2K discount to go with Brandon Cooks or Robert Woods, that's a pretty good trade-off. I mean, you can have both in your lineup, of course. But I think, like, from everything I've seen in my own calculations, that Brady and Goff are pretty comparable as options. So if Goff's receivers are a little bit cheaper than Brady's, then going to Cooks or Woods and Goff over Edelman and Brady could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would agree there. Talk a lot about Edelman, but I guess what's your take on him just being the highest priced guy? Would you be comfortable with him knowing what you know about the defense possibly being able to limit him in a variety of ways?
Yeah, I think that he's one of the top players, but I don't really see it as kind of like being a big distance from the competition. So the fact that his salary is so much higher, but the fact I don't think the opportunity is that much higher. It makes me a little cautious to recommend him, but he's as likely as anybody else to have the top score on the slate.
One note I wanted to make. So I keep saying last week. It wasn't last week, but in the NFC Championship game, we talked about it. Keith Kirkwood, he was listed as questionable, and then he was inactive. And we talked about how if he didn't play, then Michael Thomas might run much more routes in the slot. And he actually did. He ran 18 routes in the slot, his most since week 1. But are really good against the slot. That wound up not being a good thing for Michael Thomas. Had 36 yards. That's his fewest in any Drew Brees start all season. The only game where he had fewer than 36 yards was when Teddy Bridgewater started in week 17. Now Michael Thomas and Julian Edelman are different style slot receivers, and Edelman's going to be in the slot even more than that. But I thought that was interesting to note. Michael Thomas played more in the slot. There was reason to believe that actually could be a good thing for him because he has a massive size advantage on Roby Coleman. Roby Coleman is 5'7". Michael Thomas is 6'. But I mean, Michael Thomas really didn't get open in that game. Removed from the passing offense.
Yeah, if Michael Thomas can't get separation, that doesn't make a great argument for Julian Edelman, who's far less athletic, far less of a big target. But maybe the trade-off with Brady and Brees comes out a little more in the wash there, but definitely something to be worried about. Evan mentioned Gronk earlier. I feel like we should talk about him before we try to move on to some of the other pieces here. There's a lot of narratives out there about Gronk this potentially being last game. Maybe they want to feed him a little more on the way out for his sacrifice to his broken graham cracker body over the years when he's given to the Patriots. I'm certainly intrigued by it, though I worry that people are going to chase what Evan meant, big games for tight ends who are more athletic, and like a young Gronk might have fit that criteria. I don't know that current Gronk does. Alex, how are you feeling about Gronk here?
I'm totally on board with any sort of retirement game, but only when it doesn't happen in the Super Bowl. Because I find it hard to believe that they'd be like, let's win with style by giving Gronk something to go out on. That seems pretty unlikely. And the speculation that he's going to retire seems a little premature. Like, he's only 29, which, I mean, he's still a productive player. So I'm not really sure. Like, I think that's just people trying to come up with like storylines ahead of the game, So we'll see what happens. But I think that he's going to be out in the field for every play unless he gets banged up or something. And he runs routes on about 80% of those. So that gives a huge opportunity to produce. And I think his price is low enough that he's a very intriguing play. I
do think there's a little smoke to the fire with the rumors, because last year too there were the rumors about him. I had heard through people who know things, who work there. I did work at WWE. He did negotiate a little, or his people negotiated a little contract. I don't think they was very early talks. And that new rumor came up again, but then they said a couple weeks ago, I think Ian Rappaport reported that Gronk wants to get into movies, and WWE probably not an option right now. I don't know. I'm intrigued by the narrative thing here a little bit. But I agree, like a golden watch touchdown doesn't seem like necessarily a thing you want to target in the Super Bowl. Evan, give us your final take here on Gronk before we move on.
I'm playing him. I like his price on FanDuel. Again, only 500 more than Philip Dorsett. I think that. Well, I guess one little note. Because the Rams lean so much on interior pressure as opposed to edge pressure, we may see him get out into a few more routes than usual in this game because he's not going to go inside to block Aaron Donald. He's going to be he lines up on the edge. He might throw a chip, like Ndamukong Suh lines up on the edge about 25% of the time. So he might throw a chip at him, but then get him out into the route. So I think that if we could just get a couple more routes out of him, maybe that will translate to an extra target or two, and that could boost his box score outcome in the game as well.
All right, so a little love for Gronk here, and Gronk, not going to be terribly highly owned. Currently, we have him at about a quarter of the field being on him as a regular player, under 5% on him as a captain. So we have seen Gronk's ceiling being pretty high, obviously in the past, and who knows when it's a Super Bowl, anything can happen. Should we talk about the kickers on this side now? Because the kickers are going to be highly owned here, and Steven Gronkowski, a known commodity. Obviously, a lot of the red zone defense here is going to be key. Both teams here, pretty solid red zone defenses, so I don't hate the kickers. I don't hate Gronkowski. Alex, how would you feel about playing a kicker who is going to be perhaps 25% owned in a showdown slate?
Kickers throughout the whole year have been the best value plays. And the one showdown slate I had a lot of success. I went double kicker, so I'm a little biased. But I far prefer going to a guy like Gronkowski over a guy like Philip Dorsett, where maybe Dorsett gets lucky, gets a touchdown, but Gronkowski getting 8 or 9 points as an average and up to 15 or 20 if it's a kind of a lucky game. That's really all you need to win first prize in one of these tournaments. And Gronkowski is only 3,200. Greg Zuerlein's 3,400 on DraftKings. Those are some of the cheapest playable players you can get.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think, from what I noticed from doing the showdown videos all year, or at least the majority of the year, was that it's good to play a kicker when there's nobody who looks appealing as a value play underneath them. Otherwise, it's probably not the best approach. But a game like this with some defenses that could stiffen up here, Gronkowski does look a nice play. I guess let's talk about the Rams side. We can talk about the defenses at the end. The Rams, obviously, Jared Goff coming in here. Jared Goff, to me, looks like the ultimate boomer bust play. It feels like the Patriots should be able to figure him out, but they have lost the mediocre quarterbacks in the Super Bowl before, losing to Nick Foles and Eli Manning twice. Maybe Jared Goff could put his name on that mantle as well. Currently, we're projecting him for about 44% ownership as a regular player on DraftKings for the showdown slate. He's also actually going to be captain, according to our projections right now, than Tom Brady is, about 15% for him. Brady closer to 14%. I guess, Evan, tell me about Jared Goff here. Are you worried at all that he just gets gobbled up by the Patriots and a genius coach and Jared Goff perhaps not a genius quarterback?
Yeah, no respect for Jared Goff, and I'm kind of. I
said perhaps.
I'm kind of on your side, anyways. He just hasn't been that good. He hasn't been that good without Cooper Kupp. He played well, in the second half of last week's or the NFC Championship game. Really impressed about how he kind of battled back. The way that he performed in the first half of the game, that's kind of what I was expecting from him. But they scored that one touchdown. Gurley scored the touchdown right before the end of the first half, and they came out and they played really well in the second half, very much led by Jared Goff. With that said, he's gone over 7.5 yards per pass attempt, I think twice in the last 7 starts. Both occurred against the 49ers and the Cardinals in weeks 16 and 17. He's not lighting up defenses, by any means. I think the Patriots have a pretty good coverage strategy that they can throw at him. I think that in some ways it could be a little similar to what they did against the Chiefs, where they treat Brandon Cooks like the Tyreek Hill. They treat they put Stephon Gilmore on Robert Woods in the slot. Stephon Gilmore was an outside corner for the entire regular season, but he has played the most slot snaps of any Patriots cornerback in the playoffs. I think that we will see him on Robert Woods a ton. And then I think that, J.C. Jackson, the undrafted rookie, will go up against Josh Reynolds a lot. I think we may see a little bit more of Gerald Everett. One thing that Warren Sharp has talked about is that Patriots have not been as good defending 2 tight end sets as they have been defending 3 receiver, 11 personnel. We all know that the Rams are a 3 receiver, 11 personnel team, something like 90% of their snaps. But there were a couple of games down the stretch where they play more 2 tight ends, and that could play into Gerald Everett getting more playing time. Tyler Higbee, becoming a factor again. Tyler Higbee was a huge factor against the Saints. And that could actually hurt Josh Reynolds' playing time. Those are just that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I mean, I have a big total for Jared Goff. I think that the matchup is like below average. I think that his performance has been great, except for selectively. It hasn't been an explosive passing offense for a while. Brandon Cooks, one of his Super Bowl props is like around 70 yards. He hasn't gone over 70. He's gone over 70 yards one time in his last 7 games. I don't know. I'm not really expecting big time fireworks from the Rams passing attack. But they're playing indoors in a game with a huge total. So go either way, I guess. With Todd Gurley, though, I think that we are going to see him involved more in the passing game, and I think that should help Jared Goff's efficiency because, last week in the last game, he essentially got benched. And C.J. Anderson, they don't throw to C.J. Anderson.
So then I guess based on what you're saying with the 2 tight ends and also I think it was Michael Lombardi was saying on the Ringers NFL podcast, I'm pretty sure that's where I heard it, where he was saying what he expects the Rams to do is to try to spread them out and possibly run with Gurley out of, just like 3 wide sets. Would you, if you had to, I guess, make a wager, which would you go on? Do you think they would try to run it more with Anderson and 2 tight ends, or would they try to spread it out and run it with Gurley more?
I mean, they're going to do both. It's not like they're going to just do one thing, of course. Right. But I'm just talking about raising your use of 12 personnel from 18% to 30%. That could get Gerald Everett a few more snaps and a few more targets. They're going to use both formations in the game. It's just, will they use 2 tight end sets more? That could hurt the playing time of Josh Reynolds. They just going to do, one of these games where they play 96%, 3 receiver, 11 personnel, and do what Lombardi suggested, which, I mean, look, that can make sense. Another note is that the Patriots have been they've been strong in interior run defense, but they've been much weaker on perimeter runs because they're not fast. They do not have fast linebackers. Kyle Van Noy, Dante Hightower. These guys are not speed linebackers. They're big kind of thumpers. They're good blitzers, but they're not guys that are going to just go run down running backs in the flat. So that I think is another kind of thing that might bode well for Todd Gurley.
Alex, how are you feeling? Let's take it back to the passing game, and then we'll talk more about the run game at some more depth. But Jared Goff, we discussed him a little about perhaps him not being the greatest quarterback in the world, but he is in a good spot. He is indoors. He's not going to be a cold California boy for this, at least this one Super Bowl visit for him. How are you feeling about his prospects here? He's getting owned like he's Tom Brady, but he's not Tom Brady, Alex. How are you feeling about Goff?
I feel great about Goff. I mean, this is the hill I'm going to die on, this season. That's for sure. I've been picking him every single week, and he's been doing nothing. Except I didn't have him week 17 because
when he had 4 TDs.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, maybe just do the opposite of what I'm saying here. But the mitigating factor I'm seeing, Fancy Cruncher has all the stats conveniently arranged here. So I'm going back on his game log. Week 19, he had 28 passes. Week 17, he had 26. Week 16, he had 24. So, that's 3 games where he just, didn't pass enough to really get a great performance. I'm projecting him to pass 37 times, a little bit more than that this week on average. So, if he's passing 35 plus times, he's going to rack up some fancy points, and it's going to come down to who gets the ball in the end zone? Is it going to be the running backs or is it going to be the wide receivers? So I think there's a great chance that Goff has a GP winning game. He's easy to correlate with other people, so I really like going on.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the pass catchers a little bit here. Which pass catcher, Alex, would you say is your preferred guy there? We talked a little bit about Josh Reynolds. Brandon Cooks in a revengey spot, perhaps, though, as Evan mentioned, he hasn't had a ton of big games recently. Robert Woods, more consistent option. Pretty comparable prices overall. Woods a little bit cheaper on DraftKings. How are you feeling about the wide receivers here, Alex?
I'm finding that it's easier to get Cooks and Woods in. And my third player is Gerald Everett, Josh Reynolds, and Tyler Higbee a little bit harder for me to get to. I think that people are a little bit too high on Higbee because he had a good week last time. And Gerald Everett gets way more routes than Higbee, and Higbee blocks more. So I think that Everett is the superior play in that area. So he's a nice value play. And then Cooks and Woods, I think they're about as likely to have top scoring fantasy point games compared to anyone else. The fact that they're wide receivers kind of boosts their variance, which is nice. Not necessarily as important in Showdown, but I found that having either a quarterback or wide receiver at captain is usually preferable. So I think that going with those three guys is probably how I'm going to push it.
Interesting. Evan, how are you feeling here about the wide receivers? We talked a little bit about Josh Reynolds maybe getting some more run, maybe some less run. Same issues with Cooks and Woods. Which guy do you feel like would be the strongest pass catcher with Goff?
Probably Woods, because he's the most consistent. He just is targeted at the most consistent rate. The Rams' receivers are a little bit interesting because they use those guys, particularly Cooks and Woods, a lot on rushing attempts. And, that's another way that they can get speedier guys onto the edges and make those, Kyle Van Noy and Dante Hightower work.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's just one little thing to think about for Woods. Again, the matches don't look good for them on paper. Dealing with Stephon Gilmore, dealing with, probably double teams in Brandon Cook's case. That's a little concerning, on paper. But we do have target consistency working in Robert Woods' favor. Edges that I think the Rams had the most wide receiver carries in the NFL this year, and it's primarily from Cooks and Woods. So that's something to keep note of. I like that Alex mentioned Gerald Everett. If the Rams do decide to increase their use of two tight end sets, will force the Patriots to play typically how defenses react to that is they'll play more linebackers, and they'll use fewer defensive backs, and getting linebackers on the field that can't cover anyone, that's a benefit to guys like Gurley and Gerald Everett. Everett has big playability. We saw it in the last game. He had a 39-yard catch and run, really sparked the Rams offense in the second half of that game. And he was a great athlete coming out of college. His snaps are up. His targets haven't been great. They've been up and down. But he's been playing a lot. He's been out there a lot. And if the Patriots are able to slow down Robert Woods with Stephon Gilmore, if the Patriots are able to slow down Brandon Cooks with what they did to Tyreek Hill, then that could potentially force Jared Goff to look a little bit deeper into his reads and look at a guy like Gerald Everett. And man, if we could get 6, 7, 8 targets out of Gerald Everett, that would be awesome. We had a dude on the Roto World Football podcast. He's at Cleve TA on Twitter. He's real smart about. I've seen him a ton of times pick the guy to score the first touchdown in the game. He'll do it on island games for Thursday night football, for Monday night football games. He'll always have somebody picked. He has this crazy hit rate, and he's always looking for longer shots. So the probability, guys, his guy this week is Gerald Everett at 25-1 to score the first touchdown of the game. Man, that'd be a nice start for our Gerald Everett lineups, wouldn't it be?
Interesting. Yeah, Gerald Everett, very, very affordable piece of value there. Could be an interesting play. Let's talk about the running game a little more here. So Todd Gurley's been bad these playoffs. I mean, there's really no way to deny that. It's also hard to talk about him without acknowledging.
He was really good against the Cowboys now.
Yeah, okay. Fair. But I guess with CJ Anderson being, it kind of muted what he's done, I think, a little bit. But this seemed the Saints game, though, I think we could agree, unequivocally bad for Todd Gurley. Like, really
terrible.
Yeah. So this seems like a redemption spot for him. He also had a week off to, in theory, get a little healthier, get that knee at least as close to as it can be to 100%, whatever he is, wherever he falls on that scale, who knows. I think he comes out big here. And the fact that right now with ownership, we haven't projected under James White, and with all the issues we talked about with the backfield with New England, I'd much rather pay a little bit more than go to James White. I think this is Todd Gurley's either show big or he's just going to disappoint. But I'd rather go down with the Gurley ship than the Goff ship personally. Evan, how are you feeling about Gurley's chances here?
I mean, I love him so much that I don't want to jinx it, and so I'm going to knock on this wood right now. And I got big investments on this. I need Todd Gurley this week. So, but yeah, I mean, look, he is the guy that can most exploit where the Patriots are weak, and that's that they don't have very much speed on defense. They don't defend perimeter runs well. The Rams, when they run on the interior, they give the ball to C.J. Anderson. When they run exterior, give the ball to Todd Gurley. The Patriots gave up. We saw what Damian Williams did to them last week. And Damian Williams actually beat both of those guys, Hightower and Kyle Van Noy, for receiving touchdowns. He almost had a third one. The Patriots gave up. They've really been giving up like a lot of receiving production to running backs for years, and it's been pronounced in the playoffs. And look, as for the injury, I just read Dr. Chow. He just came out with his latest report. He thinks that Todd Gurley is dealing with patellar tendonitis, which sounds bad. It's definitely something that he can play through. He was dealing with that in the Dallas game when he had his most explosive game like all season based on next gen stats charting. Stamina is, I think, a continual question. Just because he hasn't been playing a lot of football recently. I mean, even in the Dallas game, he was sharing time. He's played the equivalent of like 0.8 games since week 15. Okay, and week 15 is like a long ass time ago, man. We're in February. That's like in like mid-December, dude. You know what I'm saying? So he has not played a lot of football recently. So I don't think we're going to get a game where he's in there every single snap. I think that they're going to use C.J. Anderson for interior, specific interior carries. C.J. Anderson is also pass protected really well. But I do think we're going to get a game where, look, if Gurley doesn't mess up early in the game and drop passes that cause interceptions and give the ball to the other team, then I think they're going to stick with him, and I think they're going to use him a lot and use him in very advantageous matchups that they can exploit. And I think that he will finish with over 20 touches. And I mean, I like his Super Bowl MVP bets, like the overs on his props, and I love him as if that's one game slate play.
Your guy Bobby Boom in the chat pointing out Gurley is currently 16-1 odds for an MVP, and I would agree those don't look bad here. I think he's got to show up here if he is going to be the highest paid running back in the league. Alex, how are you feeling about Gurley in this game?
Yeah, I don't think that people even need us to tell them to play Todd Gurley. I mean, he had the best fantasy season of any player. There are some question marks, but they're kind of accounted for by his price decrease. One thing I would probably avoid is playing Gurley and Anderson in the same lineup because I feel like the Rams may continue to do a hot hand approach where, like last game, as Evan was saying, if you read between the lines, Gurley's bench for dropping a pass. So, I mean, one of the two guys is going to be on the field a lot more than the other guy, I'm guessing. So I think Gurley's the safer bet. C.J. Anderson is kind of priced like he's getting half the work when that's a big question mark in my opinion. So I think Gurley, especially the fact that he's not even the most expensive player, he's a lock and load.
Yeah, I'm with you there. How much C.J. Anderson would you recommend then if we're saying it's not a 50-50 split and it's a hot hand approach. We've got him at about 22% projected ownership right now. Alex, does that feel high for you? Low? Where would you stand?
Yeah, I think that's way too high in my opinion. 22%. He's one of the higher owned guys on the slate probably, and I'm not so bullish on his outcome. I mean, I think it's pretty reasonable to project him for maybe 10 rushes and one catch or something. The one catch is probably even a stretch. So that doesn't really equate to a huge fantasy performance unless a lot of luck goes his way.
Evan, how about you? How do you feel if a quarter of the field's on CJ Anderson? Where would you want to be with that?
A quarter of the field?
Yeah, like roughly, let's say. Well, on DK, it's about 22.4% projected right now, but let's say 25%.
Yeah. I was just going to bring that up and say, hey, at what point? I mean, we agree on Gurley. And it seems like I think that people are starting to come around to that, he's not on the injury report. He's practiced fully for 4 weeks at this point. Dr. Chow has been talking about him. People know who Dr. Chow is. People listen to all the podcasts, and I mean, it seems like there's a lot of positivity at this point about Todd Gurley. This is also, sort of a product of like there being a 2-week delay in the NFL between the NFC Championship game. I think we all would have liked Gurley if the Super Bowl was last Sunday too, but I think that we probably would have gotten him at much better ownership percentages. But at what point does CJ Anderson become the play? Because you know what's going to happen in the game. CJ Anderson has played really well. And what if Gurley, keeps messing up, or if he has a setback with his knee or whatever? Like CJ Anderson then becomes like the obvious play, and he's a lot cheaper than Gurley. So I don't know I mean. Are you gonna be under the 22%? Osmo, you think?
Yeah, I think the key factor is what percentage do you think Gurley gets benched or hurt? I mean, 22% of the time seems pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he catches like 3/4 of his passes, so the chance of him dropping a pass dropping 2 passes in a row, I guess is what caused the benching. Pretty low if you're going off a season performance.
Mm-hmm.
I think 22%, people are being a little bit over optimistic, and I'd rather go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. And also, I wanted to say this, and I mean, I use the term benching as well, but, he wasn't like outright benched, really. He didn't have a lot of touches in the game. He played 32 snaps out of like 60, and CJ Anderson had, 38 or 36? So, I mean, and there were times where he was just in the game and he wasn't getting the ball. And of course, we see it on TV and it's like super highlighted to us, the highlight bias, like the dude on the sideline, but in terms of just the snaps, it wasn't that different than the Dallas game. That one was just flipped a little bit in CJ Anderson's favor, or in Todd Gurley's favor. But it's been 55-45 in both of the games. And the first one, it happened to be in Todd Gurley's favor in terms of the snaps. In the last one, it was in favor of CJ Anderson. But just the sheer touches were so lopsided in favor of CJ Anderson. And we see what's going on TV and how they cover the situation. And our minds react like that. I mean, stat shows that Gurley had a good game against Dallas, but that's kind of like our recency bias in our minds. I feel like telling us that Gurley, he's been terrible. So I don't know. It's just it's an interesting kind of like psychological dilemma. There are definitely ways that it can go wrong. We talked about, we spelled them out, but I think that so many things add up for Todd Gurley to have a really good game against the Patriots.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's got to be in more lineups than not. And if he's going to be underowned for the reasons that Evan just mentioned, recency bias, yeah, you're right. I did know that he had a good game versus the Cowboys, right, but I disqualified a little. It's if CJ Anderson could do that, obviously Todd Gurley should. But in reality, it's all a symptom of the offense and how they can attack things. And If they can create space for Gurley to get out and run on the edges, it could be a big day for him. So yeah, I'm with you there. We should talk about Greg the Leg here. We did a little Gronkowski talk before. Greg Zuerlein projected for 17.5% ownership here. He's been an MVP pretty much for that New Orleans game in particular. Great all year. How are we feeling about double kickers this week?
I think double kicker might be overkill, but I really like having at least one kicker in your lineup. These guys, you project them for 8 or 9 points, and that at their price tag, Zuerlein is like 3,400 on DraftKings. That's crazy value for Showdown. So I think that one of the most logical ways to build a lineup is getting some salary relief by putting Greg Zuerlein or Gronkowski in your lineup. Probably not a captain though.
Yes, yeah, I would agree there. I did make one lineup just tooling around just to kind of get a feel for the slate. I do have 2 kickers in it. Yes, I like both guys look like they're good, and I believe in the red zone defense here. But Evan, any reason you think Greg Zuerlein might be a good play or a worse play that he may seem at about 18% projected ownership?
Yeah, I got a lot of takes on this here.
These ones you've been saving up all year, all the Greg Zuerlein takes.
Right. Well, obviously the game it's in a dome, so optimal kicking situation. There's a really big total on the game, whether it be even, it opened 58.5. I got bet down to 56.5. Either way, really big total. You look at the game logs and Zuerlein, he has games a lot of games where he kicks 3 and 4 field goals, and he's got a monster leg. They don't call him the Greg the Leg, because he can't kick long ones. I mean, the field goal against the Saints was just absurd. I mean, that would have been good from 70 yards. It was a chip shot to Zuerlein. And also, this is Sean McVay's first Super Bowl, obviously. And, will he play it conservative? We saw it against the Saints, man. They had the ball at the 1-yard line on a 4th down, and they took the field goal. They were lucky that didn't come back to bite them. Sean McVay's been pretty conservative with his 4th down decisions all year. They're in the bottom half of the league in attempts on 4th downs, and they've actually been really bad at converting them too, which may play into the reason that they don't call very many 4th downs. They're 6 of 15. Although they're 3 for 3 in the playoffs when they've gone on 4th down, but really bad in the regular season. And for as kind of innovative and creative as Sean McVay has been, one of the weaknesses in his coaching game, I think, still is that he's not aggressive enough on 4th down. But we can benefit from that potentially with Greg Zuerlein. He's on the injury report with a foot injury, so. Look, if you're going to go real big on Greg Zuerlein, you might want to do some reading about what's going on with Greg Zuerlein. Dr. Chow says he thinks that Zuerlein is going to be fine, but you probably want to mention or keep an eye on what Dr. Chow is saying about him. Yeah, I mean, look, when I was listening to Dinkmeyer the other day, and he said that, for kickers, they're really good. A lot of times they're really good, projection plays and high floor plays. And hey, if you're going to play cash on, one of these 1-game DFS, it's they're a really strong play. They're maybe even behind only quarterbacks in terms of projectability and reliability and points per dollar and all that kind of stuff. But they don't have as much upside, generally. But Zuerlein kind of does, because he can hit the long kicks that that you can get 5 points from. And because he doesn't go for it on 4th down at a very high rate, and because Zuerlein, we saw him a lot of games this year in his game log where he made 3 or 4 field goals. That's a lot.
Man,
I am with you there.
You talked me through it, man. Greg Zuerlein, Super Bowl MVP, 80 to 1. Okay.
How about this? How about Greg Zuerlein's value maybe decreased because Johnny Hecker throws it on 4th down from a field goal kicking situation instead of a punting one, and that's McVay's wrinkle. Johnny Hecker not on the slate though, unfortunately.
Well, oh damn it, man.
Johnny Hecker's got an arm, man.
The BS thing is it doesn't even count as like a special teams touchdown, right?
Right.
No.
Yeah, you can't.
You'd have to get whatever lineman catches that for the touchdown. Yeah, not the best. But let's talk about the defenses real fast before we go give our fades and our, I guess, one contrarian pick. Probably not going to go position by position for contrarian picks for this one. Which defense would you prefer out of the two, Evan, if you had to choose one? The defense is obviously going to be pretty lowly owned. Actually, don't think they're in our ownership projections yet, but I'm sure they'll be in the final ones that come out on Osmo.com. Seems like the Rams D would be highly contrarian, but the Patriots D probably has more upside. Evan, which of the two would you take?
Yeah, I guess I would probably go with the Patriots just because I think less of Jared Goff than I do of Tom Brady.
Yep, I agree. Same logic. Alex, how about you?
Yeah, comes down to interceptions for me. Brady's interception rate is way lower than Goff's, so I favor the Patriots D.
Yeah, and the Rams do generate decent pressure, but Brady's not getting sacked anyway, at least not with much of note. So, yeah, one Rams lineup. I'm doing the max 20 on DK. I feel like that's probably where I'll go with it, but not a good defensive spot. Let's go with our fade of the week, our fade of the Super Bowl, the most important, the biggest fade of the year. And you can't pick Maroon 5. So, Alex, who would you fade for the Super Bowl?
Let me bring up the ownership here because I was gonna say Rex Burkhead, but he's really not fadeable because he's too low owned. So I will go with CJ Anderson. If the ownership holds up, I feel like the recency bias is strong. Like people saw that he had 2 good games. A lot of things have to go right for him to have a third one. The Rams need to be playing from the head, and he needs to get the work over Todd Gurley, and both of those are big ifs to me. So I'll fade CJ Anderson.
Evan, who would be your fade?
Oh, man, I hate this, but I'm gonna fade Julian Edelman.
Ooh. It's a big one. That's a big one to fade. He's one of the top 3 owned guys currently.
Yeah, it's not a good decision on my part, but
Evan, I'll make you feel better. I'll join you alongside in fading one of the higher owned wide receivers. Edelman projected to 43.6% right now. Robert Woods is going to be my fade at 42.1%. I like the run game a little more. I have a lot of questions about Jared Goff here. I think if anybody's going to get going, though, out of these higher owned guys, Goff might be able to get some cheap touchdowns. So I'll go as Woods is my fade. When he's the MVP, that's going to hurt.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like Edelman is like a really good pick for Super Bowl MVP. So, if he like returns a punt for a touchdown, he's got like 11 catches for 130 and 2 touchdowns in his potential range of outcomes as a receiver. I think he's going to get the ball on the ground. They're going to get him rushing attempts. Can I change my pick?
You can.
I think the better fade is Brandon Cooks for reasons that we outlined. But man, at the price, just being the highest DK, that makes him a tempting fade on DK because of the price.
Yeah, I would agree. And Cook's not far behind in ownership either. About 38% projected ownership for him right now. So he's in there. There, got some bold takes here. How about contrarian pick, Alex?
I'll go Gerald Everett. I think that looking at the game log, I think the public's going to be off him. His last 3 games, he got 7, 0, and 0. And that's pretty terrible. So, as Evan said, he's on the field a lot. He hasn't been getting a ton of targets recently. But over the course of the season, he's been targeted at a fair clip. So I think it's reasonable to assume that he's going to bounce back. He's pretty likely to bounce back, I should say.
Evan, how about you? Who would be your contrarian pick?
Yeah, I definitely would go with Everett, but since Alex took him, I'll just go with Philip Dorsett. Make sure you get a good price on him again. When he's only priced 500 less than Gronk, that's a tough one. Like on FanDuel, but I think that he can have a good game. If you want to tie in another narrative, he's about to hit free agency. It's a terrible wide receiver free agent market. He's going to get severely overpaid by some team. and he can, maybe tack on an extra few dollars if he has a big Super Bowl game.
Ooh, one of those regretful Super Bowl MVP contracts that stopped in the past. You know what? I hate to go directly against you like this, Alex, but 5.5% ownership on Rex Burkhead is an intriguing contrarian play to me, knowing that he can vulture some touchdowns, you can get some catches. There's risk to it. I certainly would not overload on him, but you get double the field on Rex Burkhead, and I think it's an interesting spot. So I'll go with Sexy Rexy. Oof, that's an ugly one. All right, there we go. That's everything on this slate. Anything you guys want to hit on before we do the final spiel? Alex, anything on the game that we missed, or Evan?
That's all I got, man. Good luck.
All right. So let's thank you guys for watching all year. We do really appreciate that. The success of the show has been something we've been very proud of at Awesemo. And obviously having Evan here all year has been great. So thank you, Evan, for being a part of it. Alex, thank you for coming up with the show and helping produce everything every week. It's been a lot of fun. That's my personal thanks. Alex, any final words for people to close out this NFL season?
Yeah, it's been a great season. Thanks to all our viewers, especially the ones who clicked that thumbs up button. Thanks, Evan, for bringing your talents. Definitely gave great analysis and really filled out our crew here. And thanks, Chris, for hosting, doing a great job, and Josh for being the man behind the scenes.
Yes, thanks, Josh, for always being there behind the scenes, ready for us, getting us set up. Of course, Josh Engelman, our guy. Make sure to follow him on everything and keep an eye on all of the content he has on our YouTube channel. But that's it for us. We'll be back at some point, hopefully. I don't know, maybe an NFL draft or free agency show if that's of interest to people. But we do appreciate it. Make sure to hit that like button, as Alex mentioned. Subscribe to the channel. Keep your eyes peeled. We'll be having a ton of NBA content, a ton of NHL content, MLB as well coming. So thank you for watching. Enjoy the Super Bowl. And eat healthily. I'm sure that's good luck.
Good show, guys.